All right, well, thanks everybody. This is Rob Galvin. Thanks for joining today for today's webinar. Apologies for rescheduling it last week. But I think we have a good session for you today to go through one of the new features in RhoMobile Suite 4.1. It's all about printing. So today I am your host, Rob Galvin, and we have with us Mikhail, who's with our engineering team in St. Petersburg. Welcome, Mikhail.
Hello.
Okay, and he was one of the engineers that worked on this API. I think Android implementation in particular. Is that true?
Um, Actually, Android and iOS.
Yes. Sorry, I forgot the iOS. Yes, Android and iOS. So today I'll be covering going over the API in terms of giving you an overview of how to use it, walk you through some of the basic concepts of using the API. And then Mikhail will walk through some live code examples and demonstrations using this feature. I hope that you had a chance to download RhoMobile Suite 4.1. It's been available for a few weeks now, and we're starting to see a lot of questions on Launchpad. So it looks like everybody has started to give it a try. So today we're gonna talk about printing, and it's all about our new printing capabilities. So before we get into the code, let's talk about printing and just an overview of what we're providing. In the past, you may have been familiar with one of our printing capabilities using APD, which was kind of a legacy Pocket Browser for those of you familiar with Pocket Browser or RhoElements capability. And now we're basically coming out with a new way to do printing going forward. It's a common what we've been calling these common APIs. This new way we're architecting our APIs that will give you both the same capabilities on JavaScript and Ruby. Um, and this is the first implementation of it. Out of the gate, we're supporting Zebra printers, and it's just happens to be a coincidence. The announcement a couple weeks ago, or last week, if you saw that, I'm sure you have. But out of the gate, we're supporting Zebra printers over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And from a device point of view, we're supporting Android, iOS, and Windows Mobile or CE. And we'll get into some of the platform specific notes later on in the presentation. But as a whole, we're looking to provide a way from your Row application to easily print to these external printers using this common API interface. So let's talk about a little bit how the API has been structured. If you've looked at the documentation, you may have noticed that there's actually two new API classes. There's a row printer and then a row printer Zebra class. So just wanted to spend some time talking about the differences between those two and why you would use one over the other. Row printer is essentially the parent class or the common printer class, where we're pretty much putting all of the common APIs for printers. No matter what the printer type or manufacturer is, anything that's common across them will be in this class. So a lot of the times you may need to you can just you can get away with just using row printer depending on what you're trying to do, and then for manufacturing specific access properties or methods, we would have a subclass for that manufacturer. In this case, we came out with row.printer Zebra, which would have Zebra specific APIs that are not available to the other um, types of printers that may be supported. So in that case, you would use printer Zebra. Let's say in this case we have retrieve file names is an API that's only available in the printer Zebra API. They're both written as extensions, just like any common, what we've been calling this common API since version 4.0, are all written as extensions. And when you are going to include them in your application, they're not there by default. You need to include this extension. They're not in the core APIs. They're actually built as an extension. So in the case of a row printer, you would include printing extensions in your build.yaml. And then in the case of printer Zebra, you would include both printing and printing Zebra. So you need to make sure that both extensions are listed there in the build.yaml. They are included as part of the RhoElements repository, or this is the licensed version of our our product, our RhoMobile Suite. So a license is required, although you can use the the API. It's fully functional. It's just that it requires a license. In the future, as we come out with support for other printer types, and no, I don't think this will be impacted by the acquisition. This will be driven by, as always, customer demand. Just like we support iOS today and some of our other competing products, this is driven by customer demand. So in the case in the future, you may see other printers, and they will just fall just like Printer Zebra as a subclass of Printer. We'll talk a little bit about the platform specific notes later on, but this is in general how to add the capabilities to your application for printing. Okay, let's go over some of the basics in terms of the sequence of events that need to happen when you're trying to do printing. They basically fall into 3 steps, right? You first need to find your printer, okay? You'll then need to establish an instance of a printer, and then you can actually connect and issue printing commands, okay? So let's talk about finding printers. So remember, we are supporting Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. There's an API called Search Printers. It's an object, not an object, API. It's an API that you need to establish first, or you need to call first in order to find and connect to a printer. So there's a couple of parameters that you pass into this method to find the printers. In the case of Wi-Fi, you would want to pass probably the IP address of the printer. In the case of Bluetooth, you probably want to pass the actual Bluetooth MAC address. Okay, this is the recommended approach. If you don't do that, in the callback, you may actually receive, in the case of Bluetooth, you may receive other Bluetooth objects, and we don't really recognize it's not a printer object until we try to connect to it. So it's recommended when you're doing the searching that you fine tune or filter the search parameter so that the searching and pairing process is done very quickly. If you haven't paired before with the printer, you will see the typical pairing dialogues pop up. And this needs to happen every time the application starts. Okay, you need to find a printer, because when the printer is found in the callback, there is actually a printer ID that's assigned to the found printer, and this ID is a temporary ID that the Rho application uses. Okay, and this is the ID that you need in the next step to actually create an instance object for that printer. So the search printers is initiated upon success, and we'll show you this in the demo. Upon success, it gets an ID back, and then you essentially call the next API, get printer by ID, passing in this ID, this temporary ID that you retrieved from the search printer's callback, and then you'll have an instance object of a printer. Okay, so in this case, my printer is an instance object of the printer that was found in the search method. And now, once I have this, then I can go ahead and make a connection to it, which is the first thing you need to do. And then upon connecting, and here I don't show any callbacks for handling success or failure on connecting. We'll show that in the demo. But after connecting, then you can actually start initiating commands. And we'll talk a little bit more about the commands in a minute. So I'm just going to pause there for a second. And Mikhail, do you have anything you wanted to talk about at all, or correct in what I just presented, or any questions at this point?
I have no additions at this point. I think we will talk about the details of implementation during the demo.
Very good. Okay. All right. So now that we've kind of talked about some of the basics, let's get into some of the things you can do with your printer object. And this is all in the documentation online, docs.rhomobile.com. There's an API reference, and then there's also a printer guide that kind of walks you through these same steps here. So getting printer status. So remember, now we have an instance object, my printer, that's of type, rho.printer. And now I can execute methods, instance methods that are available to it. One of them is request state. So in this particular method, we're passing in an array of status types that we want status on or state on. These types are documented in the constants section of the RhoPrinter API. So notice I'm not using rho.printer, I'm just actually using the constant name here. So it's an array of states, and they all start off with printer underscore state. So there's a variety of them that you can get state on. So I pass in an array, and then the callback that comes back from this method is in the callback object is an actual property uh, with that same exact name. So printer state is ready to print is going to be in my callback object dot printer state is ready to print. Okay, and then it'll be true or false. So that's how this method works. It's a good way to kind of check the current state of the printer, if it has paper, etc., before you actually start issuing commands and trying to print to it. Okay, here's another useful method that will return back the printer languages. So in Zebra, there's a couple of different languages that could be enabled or supported on a particular printer. So before you start issuing printer language commands, it's important to know if the printer supports it or not. So it's kind of a long method name, or enumerate supported control languages. But again, it's on the instance object my printer, and the callback will return an array of strings. And these strings are again constants in the printer documentation. So we'll look at that a little bit later when we look at the documentation page. But there's quite a few constants, and they all start with printer underscore language. Okay, so this is what is returned in this method. Okay, so now we're going to talk about actually printing. So those are just some useful features, just some basic steps for searching, connecting, and then now you're ready to go to actually start printing stuff, right? So just a little asterisk here you see in this slide before you get started. You need to know a little bit about printing on a Zebra printer in this case. We don't document that at all. It's really nicely documented on Zebra's website. There's many different user guides and primers that talk about printing labels and the different commands. But essentially, when you come to our API, there's really three ways of printing. I've kind of grouped them into these three categories. One is printing a raw string, where you're just going to send a string down to the printer, or raw command. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The other is where you actually want to um, print a file. Use it like a lot of times people will store a series of printing commands in a file, and you may want to reuse that file. So that's another way you can do it, is actually printing from physical files that you include in your application or reside on the device. And then another aspect is if there are commands stored on the printer itself, the printer may already have been preloaded with a label, let's say, and you just need to pass the data. You can do that as well. Okay, so in the first case, print raw string, it's simply as that. It's just it takes one parameter, and it's a string. Now, in that string, you can include Zebra commands. Like in this case, there's a cpcl command to change the language to ZPL, right? The important thing to remember here is when you're doing the print raw string, it's just one long string. So if you need to include several lines, you're going to need to make sure you include carriage return characters to trigger the printer commands to work properly on the Zebra printer. Okay. So that's just print raw string. So you can do that when you have some complicated, and if you're familiar with the Zebra languages, it's not so intuitive sometimes to understand what exactly is happening when you look at that string. So a lot of times people include this a set of strings in a file. So in this case, I have included address.cpcl, which is a file that I created. I stole from the Zebra primers, and took an address example and put it into a file, and I put it in my public folder in my application. So before I use any of these methods, in this case, in this example, I'm using send file contents, which I have to pass in a path to the particular file. Using our helper functions for creating the qualified path to this particular file. So I'm creating a qualified address file path, and then I'm sending this. I'm using the send file contents and passing in the address file path. Okay, and that's how I'm going to print this address label. Okay. Um, and there are some similar things like print image from file or print file. There's a couple of differences between those, but essentially that's what you're doing in this case. And we'll get into some of these demos later. Printing from storage, again, this is a Zebra specific feature here, but if I had, in this case, um, a pre-stored label on the printer, and this is a Zebra notation where it's stored actually on the printer, this E drive. Um, I essentially just need to pass in some parameters. So we have two ways to do it. We have a way of passing an array and a way and uh, passing in a hash, and they're basically the same. There's the syntax is a little different. In this case, I'm sending in a hash, and I have um, three parameters that I'm passing in: the name, the street, and then the last line of the address, and then my label would be printed. Okay, so those are basically the three kind of concepts when it comes to actually printing different types of things. One other feature that we support is printing images. Okay, so this is kind of useful. Maybe you want to use our APIs for capturing an image, or maybe picking from the gallery, the picture gallery, and you want to print a badge with a barcode, whatever. So here's a nice way for easily printing images. Now, of course, the printer needs to support images, and you need to be careful on sizes. A lot of the printers, it's just a simple low res, black and white capabilities. So just be careful, especially over Bluetooth. The larger the image size, the slower it's going to be, and you may need to throw up some status indication, whatever, for the user so they know what's going on. But anyhow, it essentially works the same as printing a set of commands from a file. And in this case, I am again including an image file in my application's public folder, and I'm just creating a fully qualified URL to that, so I can pass it into the print image from file method. Okay, so again, my printer is an instance object of RhoPrinter, and now I have this method print image from file, include the path to the image, and then there's some other properties, parameters that I'm not using this example to kind of select a section of the image or to crop an area and do it that way. You'll notice with all of these, they're done asynchronously. So there's a callback, um, and it'll indicate if it's success or not, if it was able to print it or not. So you might want to get into the habit of utilizing the callback on these commands so you can react properly in your application. Just like printing images, we can store images as well. So if we wanted to, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention in this case, the image types are JPEG or PNG. Those are the image types that we support. Storing images. So there is an API called Store Image that allows you to store an image on the device. So maybe you have a logo or something else that you're going to use repeatedly. You may want to store that image on the device and then reference it later. Um, so in this case, you can actually store an image. All the images will be stored on drive E if nothing is specified. The format doesn't essentially the extension doesn't essentially matter. It will get converted to our GRF, and you can also just store JPEGs and PNGs are what's supported. And likewise, before um, in the I think I have a syntax error here in my example, but just like before, you have to watch out for the size of the image. Okay, I think I'm not sure if Mikhail's going to demonstrate this or not. I think he may be. So, and actually, we're up for the demo time here. So, Mikhail, let me switch it over to you if I can find my mouse here on the multi monitors. And while we're doing that, we'll just pause for any questions. Um, and if you could just put your questions in the GoToMeeting section, that would be great. Okay, so I'm switching over to you, Mikhail.
Okay. Are you able to see printer itself?
Yeah, we can see the screen. It, yeah, it looks upside. The printer looks upside down, but I think we can get the gist of. It's a little blurry, but we can kind of see at least the label coming out.
Okay. So I prepared some basic examples to show how our API works right now. Uh, let's start. The first demo will be about the discovery of devices. I want to mention what discovery itself, it's a quite complicated task because we have several interfaces like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, which should be covered. And when we running this command, we are not sure if we will find any devices or not. Also, I want to mention that nearly all the operations on the um, printing are asynchronous. So you will get a result not when you are running the command, but only then callback is fired. So for discovery, we have uh, not really simple API, but it works perfectly when you want to do some complicated thing. To start the demo, about the discovery, I wrote a simple code about searching the printers. Uh, please don't look at the quite heavy complicated code because it's a kind of decoration. The search printers call itself is here. So what we are doing now? When the page loads, we display a set of drop-down lists with device information uh, which should be shown when printer actually will be discovered. And a button to start this demo. So in this demo, we will search printers, and after each printer is found, we will call search printers callback. So what we have inside it? At first, we check callback status, which should contain information about if operation was success or not. If a operation was success, we have two options. One is when we have printer ID set, and other if it is missing from the callback result. So if we have a printer ID, this means that we have another printer discovered. In other case, they think that the discovery is over and we can proceed to our next tasks. So how it actually works? We run discovery itself. Search is started. and well, looks like printer was not found this time. So I probably should reset the printer itself and try again. Actually, discovery it's quite fragile process in case of Bluetooth of, or Wi-Fi, so it's recommended to uh, run search more than once. So you will get result with greater accuracy. So let's try to find this printer again. Oh, let's wait until printer. Oh, yeah. So we got Wi-Fi on printer itself, and this time, okay. Uh, so we get a callback into our function, and this callback has an Zebra printer itself. So you can see that we have status printer success and printer ID set to Zebra TCP with some kind of address. This is a temporary ID, so it could be used only when you already discovered any device. Otherwise, it would be inaccessible. So right now I have only one printer, and you can see parameters which we got from this printer. It is connected using TCP or Wi-Fi. We have a device address and port right now. So that's it for discovery. Uh, if I had more than one printer, I have I think that this callback will be called twice, so we will get two printer ADs and store them in the printer uh, uh, in search object discovery object. So the next demo will be about connection to printer itself and checking its status. Uh, in this demo, we will use already discovered printers, which could be accessed using raw printer Zebra enumerate function. I want to note that this function will work only in case if printers are already discovered. Also, in this demo, I will show how to search a specific printer. So before connecting to the device, we will run search printer function with specific variables. So let's correct the demo a little bit and try to run it again. Okay. So as I mentioned, we should run the discovery itself first. So if I click on the connection and status demo right now, I will have no any printers in the list. So to run this demo, I should run the discovery again and yeah, try the status demo. So we will search for specific printer, which is described in those fields. So we will search for TCP printer which is located at a specified address and port. So let's start. At first, we will connect to the printer itself. Search printer and connect to it. So when we run search printers, we will have printer ID in the search printer callback. When the search is over, we are running printer found function, which takes printer ID. Then it converts this printer ID to the printer object using our function getPrinterById, and then it calls getPrinterProperties function. This function is used to access the fields of printer which are not changed during the runtime. Mostly the one field which could be changed is connected. So for the first run, when we try to access those fields, we will see that we have printer ID, printer type, address, connection type, and have a flag that we don't connect to this printer. Let's check the printer status. The printer status itself is quite informative. In this demo, I've asked the API to list all the available states of printer. These states are checked during the runtime, and they depend from the printer state itself. So if you want to get most correct information, please run this function. Then we run do check status function. We actually run my printer request status function from the API, and in the callback we just display what the result we got from the API itself. So it looks like printer is ready for printing. It has a paper inside it, and looks like we can continue to the next demo. The next demo will be about printing itself. So let's try to print an image. So we send a request to a printer, then we connect to the printer itself, and then we run print image command. So for this simple example, we already have our printer set up, so we just run commands on this printer. At first, we are trying to connect to our printer and display connection status. After that, we check if connection was successful and trying to print a demo image. And we provide some kind of parameters. The first is horizontal offset, other is vertical offset, and also I include size of image which should be printed. You should know that original image is quite big, and it's scaled down to be printed on this printer. Then the image is printed and we know about status. We check it in the callback and disconnect from printer. The other example is quite similar. We are running row commands which should be printed like printer zebra. Okay, so printer zebra and hello world. So how it works? I have set up some kind of messages for printing. You can check out which command you should use in the corresponding guide from Zebra itself. But the demo purposes, I think those commands should be enough to see how it works. So the flow is similar. We are trying to connect to the printer itself, then check if we are connected, and then run the print row string command with already prepared command. Then if this command is completed, we have another callback about printing cpcl command, and after it is also printed, we show the overall status and again disconnect from the printer. Also, we can store those commands inside the text files like test.zpl. So this is draw rectangle and print test text inside it. So let's try it out. So we will try to print file. Again, we are connecting to the printer, then running the command itself and disconnecting again. So if you are connecting or disconnecting to the printer, it could take some time. If you have a batch job of printing labels, you should just connect, then run all those commands and then disconnect. Otherwise, you will need to wait until you're connected to the printer. So the last demo is about printing stored format. I have prepared format string. It's quite cryptic itself, but it should contain barcode and text labels. And we have hash which should be printed or encoded inside barcode. I will not go through the functions because they're quite familiar. So the process is to print row string and then print stored format. So when we running this command, we are connecting to the printer, watching a callback. So here it is. We got a barcode label with some kind of encoded text inside it. So probably that's it for the simple demo. If you have a specific questions, probably you can ask them right now.
Okay. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, if you can please type them into to GoToMeeting. There's just a couple more slides and then we'll wrap it up. So, Mikhail, a couple of questions. You notice that you disconnect after each kind of operation or printing of a label. Is that the recommended practice? What happens if you leave it connected and then disconnect when the application ends, or if you forget to disconnect? What's the side effects from not disconnecting from the printer?
Okay, this is a good question because each platform, I mean iOS, Android, or Windows Mobile has its own implementations. In iOS, you can leave printer connected and nothing negative should happen at all. But in case if you disconnect, you will free resources allocated to the Wi-Fi connection. On the Android, probably it will not cause any negative effects too, but in Windows Mobile, you will have a printer stall. So in case if you are trying to write a good application, it is quite recommended to disconnect after each printing.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Let me switch over back to my screen, and we'll just finish up the presentation. Let's see. Show my screen. Oops. All right. All right. Let me finish up here. That's from the beginning. All right. So that was a nice demo, Mikhail. Thank you very much. So just a couple of notes on the platforms in particular. We'll start actually from the right instead of from the left. So Windows Mobile, one of the things you need to do is to actually install another application, what we're calling this printing service. Okay, so these instructions are detailed in the documentation, but for the other platforms, there's nothing additional you need to install. Windows Mobile does require this printing service to be installed. Okay, there's a couple other things you need to be aware of on Windows Mobile and Windows CE as well. And we talked about this. We just actually talked about this next one, disconnecting before navigating away from the page. Or and Mikhail, you can jump in on these platform notes as well. With all of them, there's a kind of just a warning when you're searching without any parameters like we demonstrated, you may and you will receive all Bluetooth devices. So it'll take a long time to do the searching. So if you can, I know a lot of times companies print the labels on the printer in terms of Bluetooth address or Wi-Fi address. This is something that you probably want to narrow down the search. When it comes to iOS, we're officially supporting the Zebra printers that have been signaled as made for iPhone or iPod. And then you do have to pair outside of the Row application on Android and I think Windows Mobile. When you do the connection, if you haven't paired for the first time, you'll see the pairing dialogues come up appropriately. These are not handled by us, but just comes up from the platform. So you don't need to do that outside the application, but on iOS you do. And iOS, there are some additional things for adding things to the plist file. Excuse me. So be sure to check the documentation for that. Some resources that might be useful. So the printing API, printing Zebra API, and the printing guide. These are all on docs.rhomobile.com. You'll see the methods and the properties and things that we mentioned. The guide kind of walks you through the same exact thing that we pretty much did today. This is one link to got a misspelling here, but the Zebra's CPCL programming guide. Okay, and then another useful resource is we have open repository on GitHub. It's called our RMS testing under RhoMobile. And this is our testing specs that we use to test the API. So you can see in great detail all the different combinations of things that are going on. It's a useful tool to learn from. So I want to share that with you. And that's pretty much the end of the presentation. So we'll just open it up again for questions. And we'll see. So Mikhail, we're going to share this this sample code along with the presentation, if that's okay with you. All right. Let's see if there's any other questions. Okay. I don't see any other questions coming in, Mikhail. So I think we're done. Any last last comments? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, that concludes today's session. Um, be on the lookout for upcoming webinars. We will have some other feature demonstrations for 4.1, and then as we get closer to announcing what's in 4.2, we'll have a webinar on that as well. And if you need to check out the previous webinars, we did one 2 weeks ago on the new Intent API. They are on developer.motorolasolutions.com. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We will see you next time. Thanks, Mikhail.